I woke up that morning with my heart full of joy, never imagining that before the night ended, my entire world would shatter into 1,000 pieces when my husband of 28 years stood up during our son's wedding dinner and announced he was leaving me for another woman. My name is Margaret. I'm 52 years old, and I live in a charming suburb of Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls gently most of the year and the streets are lined with maple trees that turn brilliant shades of gold and crimson in the fall. I thought I knew everything about my life, about my marriage, about the man I'd shared nearly 3 decades with. But that evening, as I sat at the head table in my elegant navy blue dress, watching our son Daniel and his beautiful bride Emma share their first dance, I had no idea that in just a few hours, I would be sitting alone in our bedroom, wondering how I'd missed all the signs that my husband Thomas had been planning his escape. The wedding had been perfect up until that moment. Daniel looked so handsome in his tailored charcoal suit, his dark hair neatly combed back, his eyes bright with happiness as he gazed at Emma. She was radiant in her ivory gown, her blonde hair swept up in an intricate updo adorned with tiny white flowers. The ceremony had taken place in a beautiful garden venue just outside the city, under a canopy of oak trees with the late afternoon sun filtering through the leaves, casting golden patterns on the ground. I'd cried tears of joy as I watched my only son exchange vows with the woman he loved, thinking about how Thomas and I had raised such a wonderful young man, how proud we both were, how lucky we were to have built this life together. The reception moved to an elegant ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a pristine lake. Round tables were draped in crisp white linens, centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus branches filled the air with a subtle, fresh scent. String lights hung from the ceiling, creating a warm, romantic glow as the sun began to set. I remember standing there during the cocktail hour, greeting guests, accepting compliments on how beautiful everything looked, how happy Daniel and Emma seemed. Thomas stood beside me, his hand occasionally resting on the small of my back, smiling and making small talk with relatives and friends we hadn't seen in years. Looking back now, I realize how mechanical his gestures were, how his smiles never quite reached his eyes, how he kept checking his phone and glancing toward the door. But in that moment, I was too caught up in the celebration, too focused on making sure everything ran smoothly, too happy to notice the distance that had been growing between us like a canyon slowly widening with each passing day. If you're listening to this story and relating to what I'm going through, I'd really appreciate it if you could help this channel grow by clicking that subscribe button. We're working toward reaching 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to me as I share this difficult journey. The dinner service began around 7:30 in the evening. The tables were filled with laughter and conversation, the clinking of glasses, the soft background music of a jazz quartet playing in the corner. I sat at the head table between Thomas and my mother, who had flown in from Boston for the wedding. Daniel and Emma sat in the center, surrounded by their wedding party, all of them glowing with youth and happiness. I watched them and remembered my own wedding day, how Thomas and I had been so young, so full of dreams and plans for the future. We'd met in college, both of us studying business administration, both of us determined to build successful careers while also creating a loving family. And we had done that, hadn't we? Thomas had worked his way up to become a senior financial advisor at a prestigious firm downtown. I had spent the first 10 years of our marriage working in marketing before deciding to stay home when Daniel was born, later starting my own small interior design consulting business that I ran from our home. We'd bought a beautiful 4-bedroom house in a safe, quiet neighborhood with good schools. We'd taken family vacations every summer, celebrated holidays with extended family, supported Daniel through school and sports and college. From the outside, we were the picture of a successful American family. But somewhere along the way, Thomas and I had stopped really seeing each other. Our conversations had become transactional, focused on schedules and bills and home repairs. We slept in the same bed but rarely touched anymore. When had that happened? When had we stopped kissing each other goodbye in the morning? When had we stopped asking each other about our dreams and fears? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment, but sitting there at that wedding dinner, I felt a strange, hollow feeling in my chest, like something was missing, though I couldn't quite name what it was. The speeches began after the main course was served. a delicious herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables and wild rice. Emma's father gave a touching speech about watching his daughter grow up and welcoming Daniel into their family. Daniel's best man told hilarious stories from their college days that had everyone laughing until their sides hurt. Emma's maid of honor shared sweet memories of their friendship since childhood. The room was filled with love and warmth, everyone basking in the joy of two people beginning their lives together. Then Thomas stood up. I looked at him in surprise because we hadn't planned for him to give a speech. We discussed it weeks ago and decided that since Emma's parents were handling the traditional toasts, we would just offer our congratulations privately to the couple. But there he was, standing beside his chair, tapping his knife against his wine glass to get everyone's attention. The room gradually quieted down, all eyes turning toward him expectantly. He cleared his throat, and I noticed his hand was shaking slightly as he held his glass. His face was pale, his jaw tight. For a moment, I thought he might be nervous about public speaking, which had never been his favorite thing. But then he began to talk, and the first words out of his mouth made my blood run cold. I need to make an announcement, he said, his voice steady but strangely flat. This isn't easy to say, especially here, especially now, but I can't keep living a lie anymore. I felt my mother's hand grip my arm tightly. Around the room, confused murmurs started to ripple through the crowd. Daniel half rose from his seat, his face suddenly worried. Emma looked between her new husband and my husband, her smile fading into concern. I wanted to stand up, to stop whatever was about to happen, but I felt frozen, my body refusing to respond to the panic signals my brain was sending. Margaret, Thomas said, finally turning to look at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before, a coldness, a distance that made him look like a complete stranger. This is the end for us. I've found someone new. I'm leaving you. The silence that followed was deafening. For several seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even seemed to breathe. It was as if time itself had stopped, suspended in that terrible moment of revelation. I stared at Thomas, unable to process what I'd just heard, unable to connect those words with the man I'd known for 28 years, the man I'd built a life with, the father of my son. Then everything happened, at once. Daniel jumped to his feet, his face flushed with anger. Dad, what the hell are you doing? He shouted. Emma grabbed his arm, trying to calm him down, but tears were already streaming down her face. My mother stood up beside me, her voice shaking as she said something I couldn't quite hear over the sudden roar of blood in my ears. Guests began talking in shocked whispers, some standing up from their tables, others sitting frozen with their mouths hanging open. I finally found my voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Thomas, what are you talking about? He set down his wine glass with a decisive clink against the table. I've been seeing someone else for the past year. Her name is Vanessa. She's younger. She understands me. She makes me feel alive again. I'm sorry to do this here, but I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't stand up and give some fake speech about love and commitment when I've already made my choice. A year. He'd been cheating on me for an entire year, and I'd had no idea. How could I have been so blind? I thought about the past 12 months, trying to remember signs I should have noticed. The late nights at the office. The new cologne. The way he'd started going to the gym more often. The unexplained charges on our credit card that he'd dismissed as work expenses. They'd all been right there in front of me, and I'd ignored them or explained them away because it had never occurred to me that my husband, my loyal, dependable Thomas, would betray me like this. Your support really helps as I share this painful experience. If you could take a moment to click the subscribe button, it would mean so much. We're trying to reach 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you makes a difference in building this community where we can share our stories. Daniel was shouting now, his voice carrying across the stunned room. You're doing this at my wedding? At my wedding dinner? What kind of man does that to his family? He turned to me, his face crumpling with emotion. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Emma was crying openly, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. Her parents had rushed over from their table, her father looking ready to physically confront Thomas, while her mother tried to comfort her daughter. The best man and maid of honor were standing awkwardly, unsure whether to intervene or retreat. Other guests were gathering their things, clearly uncomfortable and wanting to leave this nightmare scenario. I stood up slowly, my legs shaky beneath me, and looked at Thomas with as much dignity as I could muster. "You did this deliberately," I said, my voice stronger now, fueled by a rising tide of anger beneath the shock. "You chose the most important day of our son's life to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. You could have told me privately. You could have waited until after the wedding. But you wanted to make a spectacle of this." Thomas had the decency to look uncomfortable for a moment, but then his expression hardened again. "I'm done pretending, Margaret. I've been unhappy for years. You've been so focused on your little design business and your book club and your yoga classes that you haven't even noticed I've been miserable. So this is my fault?" I asked, my voice rising despite my attempt to stay calm. "You cheat on me for a year. You destroy our son's wedding, and somehow I'm the one to blame because I had hobbies and interests?" "I'm not doing this here," Thomas said, turning away from me. "I'll come by the house tomorrow to get my things. My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce." He walked out of the ballroom without another word, leaving behind a wake of shocked guests and a destroyed celebration. I stood there, watching him go, feeling like I was in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. Daniel came over and wrapped his arms around me, and I held onto my son as if he were the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become unrecognizable. Emma joined us, still crying, apologizing over and over for her ruined wedding. I stroked her hair and told her it wasn't her fault, that nothing about this was her fault, that Thomas alone was responsible for his choices. But inside, I felt hollow and broken, like someone had reached into my chest and torn out everything that made me who I was. The wedding ended early, of course. Guests trickled out with sympathetic looks and awkward condolences, unsure what to say to the bride and groom or to me. The venue staff looked uncomfortable as they began cleaning up half-eaten dinners and abandoned champagne glasses. The beautiful white wedding cake sat untouched on its table, a symbol of all the joy and celebration that had been stolen from this day. My mother took charge with the efficiency she'd always had in crisis situations. She arranged for my sister to drive me home while she stayed with Daniel and Emma, making sure they got to their hotel room okay and helping them deal with the practical matters of canceling their honeymoon departure the next morning. They'd planned a 2-week trip to Italy, a dream vacation they'd been excited about for months. Now, everything was tainted by what Thomas had done. I barely remember the drive home. My sister Rachel kept trying to talk to me, asking if I was okay, telling me that Thomas was a bastard and she'd never liked him anyway, which wasn't true, but I appreciated the sentiment. I just stared out the window at the familiar streets of my neighborhood, watching the houses pass by in the gathering darkness. These were streets I'd driven down thousands of times, past houses where I knew the neighbors, where I'd attended block parties and holiday gatherings, where I'd walked Daniel to school when he was little. Everything looked the same as it had that morning, but everything was different. When we pulled into my driveway, I saw that Thomas's car was gone. He'd already been here and taken some of his things. The garage door was open, and I could see empty spaces where his golf clubs and tools had been. He'd wasted no time in beginning his new life without me. Rachel wanted to stay with me, but I told her I needed to be alone. She made me promise to call her if I needed anything, at any time of the night, and she made me promise I wouldn't do anything drastic. I assured her I was fine, which was a lie, but she eventually left, though I could see the worry in her eyes as she drove away. The house felt enormous and empty without Thomas's presence. We'd lived here for 19 years, since Daniel was 9 years old. Every room held memories of birthdays and holidays, of homework sessions at the kitchen table and movie nights on the couch, of lazy Sunday mornings and family dinners. I walked through the rooms in a daze, touching furniture and looking at photographs, trying to understand how the life captured in those images had led to this moment. In our bedroom, I found that Thomas had cleared out his closet, taking most of his clothes and shoes. His nightstand was empty, his toiletries gone from the bathroom. It was as if he'd been planning this extraction for a while, getting everything ready so he could make a quick escape after his dramatic announcement. I sat down on the edge of our bed, the bed we'd shared for so many years, and finally allowed myself to cry. If my story is resonating with you, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your subscription helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers and creates a space where we can all share and heal from our experiences together. Just click that red subscribe button. I cried for hours that night, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. I cried for the marriage I'd thought we had. I cried for Daniel's ruined wedding day. I cried for Emma, who would forever associate her marriage with this tragedy. I cried for all the years I'd invested in a relationship that had apparently meant nothing to Thomas. I cried for the future I'd imagined, growing old together, becoming grandparents together, traveling in retirement together. All of those dreams dissolved like sand castles washed away by the tide. At some point, exhausted from crying, I fell asleep on top of the covers, still wearing my navy blue dress. I woke up around 3 in the morning, disoriented and achy, my face swollen, and my throat raw. The house was dark and silent around me. I got up and changed into pajamas, moving like a robot through the motions of washing my face and brushing my teeth. In the bathroom mirror, I looked at myself and barely recognized the red-eyed, haggard woman staring back at me. I spent the rest of that night sitting in our living room, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, watching the sky gradually lighten through the windows. I thought about Vanessa, the woman Thomas had left me for. Who was she? How had they met? What did she have that I didn't? Thomas had said she was younger. How much younger? Did she work at his firm? Was she a client? How long had they been planning this? Had he been laughing at me all this time, going through the motions of our marriage while counting down the days until he could escape? The anger that I'd felt briefly at the wedding returned, stronger now. How dare he do this to our family? How dare he destroy Daniel's special day with his selfish announcement? If he wanted a divorce, fine, but he could have waited. He could have shown some basic human decency and respect for his son. Instead, he'd chosen cruelty, chosen to make a public spectacle, chosen to maximize the humiliation and pain he inflicted on everyone who loved him. Daniel called around 8 in the morning. He and Emma had decided to postpone their honeymoon indefinitely. He wanted to come over and check on me. I told him absolutely not, that they should take their trip, that they shouldn't let Thomas ruin anything else for them. But Daniel was insistent. He said they couldn't possibly enjoy a romantic vacation while I was going through this, while everything was such a mess. We talked for a long time, both of us trying not to cry, both of us trying to make sense of what had happened. I should have seen something, Daniel kept saying. I should have noticed Dad was acting weird. I should have stopped him somehow. I assured him that none of this was his fault, that Thomas had clearly been hiding his affair very carefully, that even I hadn't suspected anything until he made his announcement. But Daniel was devastated not just by his father's betrayal of me, but by the way Thomas had weaponized what should have been the happiest day of his life. It changed everything between them. Daniel said he didn't know if he could ever forgive his father for this, and I understood exactly how he felt. My mother and sister came over around noon with groceries and determination. They decided I needed taking care of whether I wanted it or not. Mom made soup while Rachel sat with me at the kitchen table, holding my hand and letting me talk through everything again and again, trying to process the incomprehensible. They'd both been through divorces themselves years ago, so they understood the particular flavor of pain that comes from having your partner choose someone else over you. You need to get a lawyer right away, Rachel said. Don't wait for Thomas's lawyer to contact you. Be proactive. Protect yourself financially. She was right, of course. As much as I wanted to just crawl into bed and hide from the world, I had practical matters to deal with. Thomas and I had joint bank accounts, shared assets, a house with both our names on the mortgage. I had no idea what he'd already done in terms of moving money around or protecting his own interests. I needed to stop thinking like a heartbroken wife and start thinking like someone in a legal battle. Mom stayed with me that night, sleeping in the guest room, insisting that I shouldn't be alone yet. I was grateful for her presence, even though part of me wanted solitude to fully feel the weight of what had happened. We stayed up late talking, and she shared stories from her own divorce, how she'd survived, how she'd rebuilt her life. It helped, a little, to know that this pain wasn't permanent, that people did get through betrayals like this and came out stronger on the other side. The next few days were a blur of activity. I met with a divorce attorney that Rachel recommended, a sharp woman named Patricia who had a reputation for being aggressive in defending her clients' interests. She asked me detailed questions about our finances, our assets, the timeline of Thomas's affair. I told her everything I knew, which wasn't much since I'd only just found out about Vanessa's existence. Patricia advised me to start gathering financial documents, to make sure I had access to our bank accounts, to document everything. She said that Thomas's public announcement might actually work in my favor during the divorce proceedings, showing him to be deliberately cruel and potentially affecting how a judge would view his behavior. She also said I should prepare myself for a long, difficult process. Divorces, especially after long marriages with significant shared assets, rarely went quickly or smoothly. I also had to deal with the social fallout from the wedding disaster. Friends and extended family called constantly, expressing shock and sympathy, asking what they could do to help. Some of them admitted they'd suspected something was off with Thomas, but hadn't wanted to say anything. These conversations were painful because they made me feel even more foolish for not noticing what apparently multiple other people had seen. The story spread quickly through our social circle and our neighborhood. I felt exposed and humiliated every time I had to leave the house, knowing that people were talking about me, pitying me, maybe even judging me for not keeping my husband satisfied. It was irrational, I knew that, but shame is rarely logical. I found myself avoiding the grocery store and other places where I might run into people I knew. Please help this channel grow by subscribing. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and sharing these stories helps all of us feel less alone in our struggles. Your subscription really does make a difference. About a week after the wedding, Thomas called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice sounded strange on the phone, formal and distant, as if he were speaking to a business associate rather than the woman he'd been married to for 28 years. I wanted to discuss the logistics of separating our assets, he said without any preamble. You mean you want to discuss how much you're going to try to screw me over in the divorce? I replied, surprised by the bitterness in my own voice. There was a pause. Margaret, there's no need to be hostile. I'm trying to handle this in a civilized manner. I laughed, a harsh sound that didn't contain any humor. Civilized? You announced you were leaving me at our son's wedding reception in front of 100 people, and you want to talk about being civilized? I've already apologized to Daniel for the timing, Thomas said, though I noted he hadn't apologized to me. I thought it would be better to be honest rather than continue the charade. You thought it would be better? I felt my anger rising again, hot and fierce. You didn't think about anyone but yourself, Thomas. You didn't think about Daniel having to remember his wedding day as the day his father destroyed his parents' marriage. You didn't think about Emma, who did nothing to deserve having her special day ruined. You didn't think about me, standing there in front of everyone we know, being publicly humiliated. You only thought about yourself and your need for dramatic honesty. I'm not going to argue with you, Thomas said coldly. My lawyer will be sending over the initial divorce papers. I suggest you review them carefully. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, shaking with fury and hurt. The Thomas I'd known, or thought I'd known, would never have been this callous, this deliberately cruel. This man on the phone was a stranger wearing my husband's voice. Daniel came over that evening. He looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, his usual cheerful energy completely absent. He and Emma had been fighting, he told me, because she felt like their marriage had started under a curse, that what happened at their wedding was a bad omen. He was trying to reassure her while simultaneously dealing with his own grief and anger over his father's betrayal. It wasn't fair that he had to carry all of this on top of being a newlywed. We talked for a long time that night. Daniel shared memories of times when he'd sensed tension between Thomas and me, but had dismissed it as normal marital stuff. He felt guilty, as if he should have done something to prevent this, which was absurd but understandable. Children always feel responsible for their parents' problems, no matter how old they are. Do you think Dad's been unhappy our whole marriage? Daniel asked at one point, his voice small and uncertain. I thought about the question carefully before answering. I think your father and I had good years together. Real happiness. But somewhere along the way, we stopped putting effort into our relationship. We got complacent. We became roommates instead of partners. That doesn't excuse what he did, how he did it, but I have to be honest and say I saw signs that we were drifting apart. I just didn't think it would lead to this. So, you're saying it's partly your fault? Daniel looked upset by this idea. No, I said firmly. I'm saying that marriages require work from both people. If Thomas was unhappy, he should have talked to me about it. We could have tried counseling, we could have worked on rebuilding our connection. Instead, he chose to have an affair and then blow up our family in the most hurtful way possible. That's 100% his choice and his responsibility. Daniel seemed to accept this, though I could tell he was still struggling with the complexity of it all. He wanted villains and heroes, a clear narrative of right and wrong. But real life is rarely that simple, even when someone does something as clearly wrong as what Thomas had done. Over the following weeks, I began the painful process of disentangling my life from Thomas's. We had to divide everything we'd accumulated over nearly 3 decades together. Who got which furniture? Which dishes? What about the photo albums? The Christmas ornaments that we'd collected from every vacation we'd ever taken? Every item was laden with memories, and sorting through them felt like performing surgery on my own heart. The financial aspects were even more complicated. Thomas made significantly more money than I did with my small interior design business. Patricia said I was entitled to alimony and a substantial portion of our shared assets, but Thomas's lawyer was fighting everything, trying to minimize what I'd receive. It became clear that Thomas wasn't interested in being fair or generous. He was protecting his future with Vanessa, making sure he had plenty of resources for his new life, while leaving me to struggle. I learned through mutual friends that Vanessa was 34 years old, 18 years younger than me, 23 years younger than Thomas. She was a personal trainer at the gym where he'd started working out a year ago. They'd apparently bonded over their mutual interest in fitness and healthy living. I wanted to hate her, but mostly I felt a strange kind of pity. She was involved with a man who had proven himself capable of breathtaking cruelty and selfishness. Eventually, she'd see that side of him too. If you're finding strength in this story, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to the channel. We're building a community of people supporting each other through difficult times, and we're working toward that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Your subscription helps more than you know. Around 6 weeks after the wedding, I had my first real breakdown. I'd been holding it together, going through the motions, dealing with lawyers and paperwork and division of assets. But one evening, I was cleaning out a closet and found a box of old love letters that Thomas had written me when we were dating in college. I sat down on the floor and read through them, seeing the words of a young man who had once loved me desperately, who had promised me forever, who had seemed incapable of ever hurting me. Where had that man gone? When had he turned into someone who could stand up at his son's wedding and casually destroy everything we'd built? I read those letters and cried until I couldn't breathe, until Rachel had to come over, because Mom had called her worried after I hadn't answered my phone for hours. Rachel found me on the closet floor, surrounded by yellowed pieces of paper covered in Thomas's handwriting, and she just sat down beside me and held me while I sobbed. She didn't try to tell me it would be okay or that I was better off without him. She just let me feel the full weight of my grief, which was exactly what I needed. I gave him the best years of my life, I said when I could finally speak again. I built my entire world around him and Daniel. I made our house a home. I supported his career. I was faithful and loving and present. And it wasn't enough. I wasn't enough. Stop, Rachel said firmly. This isn't about you not being enough. This is about Thomas being broken in some fundamental way. Happy, emotionally healthy people don't blow up their families like this. They don't choose cruelty over kindness. Whatever is wrong with him, it has nothing to do with your worth as a person. Intellectually, I knew she was right. But emotionally, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I'd been prettier, younger, more exciting, more attentive, Thomas wouldn't have strayed. It's what every betrayed spouse feels, I think, that terrible conviction that somehow we caused our partner's betrayal through our own inadequacy. I started going to therapy around this time. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, was a calm, compassionate woman who specialized in helping people through major life transitions. She helped me work through my feelings of worthlessness and shame, helping me see that Thomas's choices were his own and didn't reflect on my value as a person. She also helped me start thinking about who I wanted to be moving forward once the dust settled from this disaster. You've spent almost 3 decades defining yourself largely through your roles as wife and mother, Dr. Chen said during one session. This is an opportunity, however painful, to discover who Margaret is independent of those relationships. The idea terrified me, but also intrigued me. Who was I without Thomas? I'd been with him since I was 24 years old. I'd never lived alone as an adult. I'd never made major life decisions without considering his opinion. I'd never traveled solo or made plans that were just about what I wanted. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free to do whatever I wanted, to be whoever I wanted. The freedom was dizzying and frightening in equal measure. Daniel and Emma's marriage was struggling, which broke my heart almost as much as my own situation. Emma couldn't let go of the trauma of their wedding day. Every time they had a disagreement or difficulty, she brought up the wedding as evidence that they'd started their marriage under cursed circumstances. Daniel was patient with her, but I could see the strain it was putting on him. He was caught between supporting his new wife, supporting me, and dealing with his own feelings about his father's betrayal. I tried to help them as much as I could without interfering too much in their marriage. I took Emma out for coffee and listened to her fears, reassuring her that what happened at their wedding wasn't a reflection on their love for each other. I reminded her that marriages face challenges, but those challenges don't have to define the relationship unless you let them. Gradually, she seemed to accept this, though I knew the scar from that day would never completely fade. 3 months after the wedding, the divorce was finalized. Patricia had fought hard for me, and in the end, I got a fair settlement, though not as much as I felt I deserved given the circumstances. I got to keep the house, which was important to me because it was filled with memories of raising Daniel. Thomas had to buy out my share of his retirement accounts. I received alimony for 5 years, which would help me rebuild my finances and grow my design business. The day the divorce became official was strange. I thought I'd feel relieved or free, but instead I mostly felt hollow. I was no longer Margaret Reynolds, wife of Thomas. I was just Margaret Reynolds, single woman, starting over at 52 years old. It was terrifying and sad, and also, in a strange way, a little bit exciting. I made some changes after the divorce was final. I redecorated the house, getting rid of furniture that reminded me too much of Thomas and replacing it with pieces that reflected my own taste. I joined a divorced women's support group where I met others who were going through similar experiences. Hearing their stories helped me feel less alone and less like my situation was uniquely terrible. I also started focusing more seriously on my interior design business. With the alimony and my settlement, I had some financial cushion to invest in marketing and expanding my client base. I discovered that I actually really enjoyed the work when I wasn't treating it as just a side hobby. I had talent and vision, and clients responded well to my ideas. Within 6 months, I had more business than I could handle on my own and had to hire an assistant. Your support means everything to this channel. If you haven't already, please click that subscribe button to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Sharing these stories creates connection and healing for all of us going through difficult times. Daniel and Emma's marriage survived its rocky start. They went on a delayed honeymoon to Italy about 6 months after the wedding, and the trip seemed to help them reconnect and remember why they'd fallen in love in the first place. When they came back, Emma seemed lighter, less haunted by what had happened. She and Daniel started marriage counseling, working through the trauma together, and their relationship grew stronger as a result. About a year after the divorce, I ran into Thomas at a charity event that we'd both attended annually for years. I debated whether to go, not wanting to see him, but ultimately decided I wouldn't let him take this away from me too. He was there with Vanessa, who looked exactly as I'd imagined, young and fit and smiling adoringly at Thomas. We made awkward small talk for a few minutes. Thomas looked older than I remembered, tired despite his apparent fitness. Vanessa seemed nice enough, though she clearly had no idea what to say to me. I felt nothing as I stood there talking to them. No anger, no jealousy, no residual love. Just a kind of detached curiosity about this man I'd once known so intimately, who is now a complete stranger. As I walked away from that conversation, I realized I'd turned a corner. Thomas no longer had the power to hurt me. He'd done his worst, destroyed what we'd built together, and I'd survived. More than survived, actually. I'd discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed. I'd built a new life that was entirely my own, full of possibilities that excited me. I started dating again around 18 months after the divorce, tentatively at first. It felt strange to go out with men who weren't Thomas, to imagine being intimate with someone new, to think about potentially building another relationship. But it was also thrilling in a way I hadn't expected. I felt like a completely different person than the woman who'd sat at that wedding dinner 2 years ago, devastated and broken. I went out with a few different men, some through dating apps, some through mutual friends. Most of them were perfectly nice, but not right for me. Then I met Robert at an art gallery opening that my support group attended together. He was 60, a retired architect, divorced for 5 years, with grown children of his own. We started talking about the sculpture exhibit and ended up talking for 3 hours, closing down the gallery. Robert and I took things slowly, building a friendship first before it developed into something romantic. He'd been through his own painful divorce and understood the lingering trust issues and fears I carried. He was patient and kind, never pushing me faster than I was ready to go. He made me laugh and challenged me intellectually and treated me with a respect and consideration that I'd forgotten was possible in a relationship. I'm not saying Robert is my happily ever after. I'm not sure I believe in that anymore after what happened with Thomas. But he's a wonderful companion and friend, and whatever our relationship becomes, I'm grateful to have him in my life. He's shown me that not all men are like Thomas, that betrayal doesn't have to define my future relationships, that I can trust again, even after having that trust shattered so completely. Daniel and Emma told me last month that they're expecting their first child. I cried when they shared the news, tears of pure joy this time instead of pain. I'm going to be a grandmother, something I dreamed about but wasn't sure would happen after everything our family had been through. They asked me if I'd be okay with them not telling Thomas about the pregnancy right away. Daniel said he still wasn't ready to have a relationship with his father, that the betrayal ran too deep to heal quickly. I told him that was entirely his decision, and I'd support him either way. Whatever Daniel needed to do to protect his own emotional well-being and his marriage was the right choice, and he shouldn't worry about my feelings in that equation. Thomas had made his choices, and now he had to live with the consequences, which included potentially being estranged from his son and missing out on his grandchild's life. Looking back now, almost 3 years after that terrible night at the wedding, I can see how much I've changed. The woman who sat at that head table, completely blindsided by her husband's announcement, seems like a different person to me now. She was softer, more naive, more willing to ignore warning signs in favor of maintaining comfortable illusions. She'd built her identity so completely around being Thomas's wife that she'd forgotten how to be just herself. I don't miss that version of myself, honestly. She was too dependent, too willing to settle for a marriage that had become hollow. I'm not saying Thomas's betrayal was justified or that I deserved what he did to me. But I am saying that sometimes terrible things crack us open in ways that allow new growth, new strength, new possibilities to emerge. I would never have chosen this path for myself, but now that I've walked it, I've discovered capabilities and resilience I didn't know I possessed. My interior design business is thriving now. I've landed several high-profile clients and have been featured in a local design magazine. I'm making more money than I ever did when I was married, and every dollar feels more meaningful because I earned it through my own talent and hard work. I've hired 2 assistants and I'm considering renting office space outside my home, really legitimizing the business as more than just a hobby. If this story is speaking to you, I'd really appreciate your support by subscribing to the channel. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps us build this community of people sharing their experiences and supporting each other through life's challenges. I've also become more adventurous in ways I never was during my marriage. Last year, I went on a solo trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, something I'd always wanted to do, but Thomas had never been interested in. I spent a week wandering through art galleries, hiking in the desert, eating at restaurants I chose without having to consider anyone else's preferences. It was liberating and empowering, proof that I could navigate the world completely on my own terms. I've reconnected with old friends from college that I'd lost touch with over the years. Thomas had never particularly liked them, so gradually I'd let those friendships fade. Now I realize how much I'd given up trying to keep him happy, how much of myself I'd sacrificed without even recognizing it was happening. These friendships have brought so much joy back into my life, reminding me of who I was before I became defined by my marriage. My relationship with Daniel has deepened in unexpected ways. We talk more honestly now than we ever did before. He's shared things about his childhood, observations he'd made about the dynamics between Thomas and me that I'd never known he'd noticed. It's been painful sometimes, realizing how much our marriage problems had affected him even when we thought we were hiding them. But it's also brought us closer, this new honesty between us. Emma and I have also developed a real friendship separate from her being my daughter-in-law. She comes over for coffee regularly, and we talk about everything from her pregnancy to her career to her own fears about marriage after witnessing what happened between Thomas and me. I try to reassure her that every marriage is different, that she and Daniel have tools and awareness that Thomas and I never had, that the simple fact they're willing to work on their relationship puts them ahead of where we were. The baby is due in 3 months, a little girl they're naming Sophie. Daniel asked me if I'd be willing to be in the delivery room with them, and I was so honored I cried. Emma's mother will be there too, so Sophie will be welcomed by both her grandmothers, surrounded by love from the moment she enters this world. I've already started decorating a nursery in my guest room for when they need babysitting help, choosing soft yellows and greens, painting clouds on the ceiling, creating a space full of light and hope. Thomas reached out a few months ago, sending me an email that was clearly prompted by his therapist. He apologized for how he'd handled the divorce announcement, acknowledging that choosing to do it at Daniel's wedding was cruel and selfish. He said he'd been in a dark place mentally, feeling trapped and desperate, and he'd lashed out in the worst possible way. He said he hoped someday I might be able to forgive him. I read that email several times, trying to figure out how I felt about it. The apology felt sincere, but it also felt insufficient given the magnitude of what he'd done. An apology doesn't undo the humiliation, doesn't erase the pain, doesn't give me back the years I spent building a life with someone who ultimately discarded me so casually. I wrote back eventually, a short response saying I appreciated the apology and I hoped he was working on becoming a better person, but that forgiveness wasn't something I was ready to offer yet and might never be. Dr. Chun and I talked a lot about forgiveness in therapy. She helped me understand that forgiveness isn't about absolving someone of their wrongdoing or saying what they did was okay. It's about releasing yourself from the burden of carrying anger and resentment, about choosing peace over bitterness. I'm working toward that, but it's a process. Some days I feel completely free of anger toward Thomas. Other days, something will remind me of what he did, and the fury comes rushing back, as fresh as it was that terrible night. What I've learned through all of this is that healing isn't linear. You don't just wake up one day completely over your trauma. It comes in waves, good days and bad days, moments of strength and moments of weakness. The key is to be gentle with yourself through the process, to not judge yourself for feeling things even years later, to recognize that significant betrayal leaves scars that don't fully disappear just because time has passed. I've also learned the importance of community during difficult times. My support group, my family, my friends, even this channel where I'm sharing my story, all of these connections have been vital to my healing. Humans aren't meant to suffer alone. We need each other's stories and support and validation. Knowing that other people have been through similar experiences and survived, even thrived, gave me hope during my darkest moments. The Divorced Women Support Group I joined has been particularly transformative. We meet twice a month, 8 women ranging in age from 30 to 70, all of us navigating the aftermath of marriages that ended. Some were betrayed like me. Others initiated their divorces because they were unhappy or incompatible with their partners. A few escaped abusive relationships. Our circumstances are all different, but the core experience of rebuilding your life after a marriage ends is universal. These women have become some of my closest friends. We celebrate each other's victories, whether it's landing a new job, going on a good date, or simply getting through a holiday without falling apart. We support each other through setbacks and bad days. We share practical advice about everything from lawyers to dating apps to how to handle awkward social situations where your ex might appear. We've created our own little family, bound together by shared experience and mutual understanding. Take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. Your support helps us reach that 1,000 subscriber goal and creates a space where more people can share their stories and find community. Just click that subscribe button, it really does make a difference. One of the most surprising aspects of this whole experience has been discovering my own strength. Before the divorce, I would have told you I couldn't possibly survive without Thomas, that I needed him, that my life would fall apart if he left. But when he actually did leave, when I was forced to stand on my own, I discovered I was much more capable than I'd ever given myself credit for. I handled lawyers and finances. I rebuilt my business. I supported my son through his crisis while dealing with my own. I navigated the social awkwardness and gossip. I did all of it, and I'm still standing. That realization has been empowering in ways I'm still discovering. I'm no longer afraid of being alone because I know I can handle it. I'm no longer willing to settle for relationships or situations that don't serve me because I know my own worth. I'm no longer defining myself primarily through my relationships with other people because I've learned to value my own company and my own accomplishments. My relationship with my mother has also deepened through this experience. She stayed with me for the first month after the divorce, and during that time we had conversations we'd never had before. She shared details of her own divorce that she'd never told me, the pain and fear and eventual triumph of building a new life. She admitted she'd seen signs that Thomas was unhappy but hadn't wanted to interfere. She apologized for that, though I told her it wasn't her fault, that Thomas's choices were his alone. Mom is 78 now, still sharp and active, and watching her navigate her own independent life has been inspiring. She divorced my father 30 years ago and never remarried, choosing instead to focus on her career, her friendships, her hobbies and interests. She travels extensively, volunteers with several organizations, has a rich social life. She's living proof that a woman's life doesn't end when her marriage does, that there can be joy and purpose and adventure long after divorce. Rachel has also been an incredible support. She went through her own divorce 15 years ago and has since remarried happily, so she offers a different perspective than Mom. She shows me that it's possible to trust again, to open your heart to someone new, to build a healthy relationship even after experiencing betrayal. Her husband Mark is wonderful, kind and funny and completely devoted to her, nothing like her first husband who cheated on her repeatedly before she finally found the courage to leave. The holidays have been complicated to navigate as a divorced woman. That first Thanksgiving after the divorce, Daniel and Emma had to figure out how to split their time between multiple families, including Thomas and Vanessa. It was awkward and painful, sitting at my own table with just Mom and Rachel and her family, knowing that Daniel was spending part of the day with his father and the woman he'd left me for. But we got through it, and subsequent holidays have gotten easier as we've established new traditions. Last Christmas was actually lovely. Daniel and Emma hosted at their house, and they made it clear that Thomas wasn't invited. They wanted their first Christmas as a married couple to be drama-free, focused on celebrating with the people who mattered most to them. We had a beautiful day together, just the 6 of us, Mom and Rachel and Mark and me, and the expecting couple. Emma was 5 months pregnant by then, her baby bump just starting to show, and watching Daniel rest his hand protectively on her stomach filled me with such joy and hope for the future. Thomas sent Daniel a long email after Christmas, hurt that he hadn't been included in the celebration. Daniel showed me the email, asking for my advice on how to respond. I told him what I genuinely believed, that he needed to be honest with his father about how much damage the wedding announcement had caused, how it had affected Daniel's ability to trust Thomas and want him in his life. Daniel wrote back to his father with that honesty, and Thomas apparently didn't take it well, sending an angry response about how Daniel was punishing him indefinitely for one mistake. But it wasn't one mistake, was it? It was a series of choices. Choosing to have an affair. Choosing to lie for a year. Choosing to announce the affair publicly at the wedding. Choosing to prioritize his own need for honesty over his son's happiness on his wedding day. Choosing to be cruel rather than kind in how he handled the divorce. All of those were separate choices, each one compounding the damage. Daniel had every right to need space and time to heal from all of that. I've thought a lot about what I would say to Thomas if I had the chance for a truly honest conversation. Not the stilted small talk at the charity event, but a real discussion about everything that happened. I think I'd tell him that while I'm grateful in some ways for the wake-up call, for being forced to discover my own strength and rebuild my life, I'll never understand the cruelty of how he did it. There were 1,000 kinder ways to end our marriage. He chose the most hurtful one deliberately, and that speaks to something broken in his character that I'm glad I no longer have to deal with. I'd also tell him that I hope he's found whatever he was looking for with Vanessa, but I suspect he hasn't. Because the problem wasn't me, or our marriage specifically. The problem was something inside him, some inability to be satisfied, some need to blow up his life rather than do the hard work of fixing it. That kind of destructive impulse doesn't just disappear because you're with someone new. Eventually, he'll probably do to Vanessa what he did to me, and she'll learn the hard way what I already know, that Thomas is fundamentally selfish in ways that make him incapable of being a good partner. But mostly, if I'm being really honest, I don't think about Thomas much anymore. He's become irrelevant to my daily life, just someone I used to know, someone who once mattered but doesn't anymore. That indifference is perhaps the truest sign of healing, that the person who once defined my entire world has become just a footnote in my story, a chapter I've moved past. Please help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers by clicking that button right now. Building this community of shared experiences is so important, and your subscription makes you part of that community. Robert and I have talked about the future recently. He's asked if I'd ever consider getting married again, and I've been honest that I don't know. The institution of marriage feels tainted to me now, too associated with pain and betrayal. But I also know that's not fair to Robert or to the possibility of what we could build together. He says he's patient, that there's no rush, that we can figure out what makes sense for us without following traditional relationship scripts. I appreciate that about him so much, that willingness to let our relationship evolve organically without pressure or expectations. After spending nearly 3 decades in a marriage that ended so badly, I need that freedom to explore what I want without feeling obligated to follow a predetermined path. Maybe eventually I'll want to marry again. Maybe I'll be happy just having a committed partnership without the legal formality. Maybe Robert and I won't work out long-term, and I'll end up with someone else or alone. All of those possibilities feel okay to me now in a way they wouldn't have a few years ago. I've been working with a financial advisor to plan for my future security. The alimony ends in another 2 years, so I need to make sure my business income can fully support me by then. The advisor has been impressed with how much I've grown the business and believes I'll be financially stable even after the alimony stops. We're working on retirement planning, investment strategies, all the things I used to leave to Thomas to handle. Taking control of my own financial future has been empowering, another area where I've discovered capability I didn't know I had. I've also started writing about my experience, not just telling the story, but also writing essays about divorce, betrayal, healing, rebuilding. An online publication that focuses on women's issues has published several of my pieces, and the response has been overwhelming. So many women have reached out to share their own stories, to thank me for putting into words what they felt, to tell me my writing helped them feel less alone. It's shown me that there's value in sharing our pain, that vulnerability creates connection in powerful ways. Daniel has been reading my essays, and he told me recently that they've helped him understand what I went through in ways he hadn't fully grasped before. He said he'd been so focused on his own pain and anger about the wedding that he hadn't fully considered the depth of what I experienced, the complete upheaval of my life and identity. That conversation brought us even closer, deepened our relationship in ways I'm grateful for, even though the circumstances that created this intimacy were so painful. Emma reads them too, and she says they're helping her process her own fears about marriage. Seeing how I've survived and thrived after such a devastating betrayal has given her confidence that even if the worst happens in her own marriage, she would be able to handle it. I don't want the worst to happen for them, of course. I want Daniel and Emma to have the happy, lasting marriage that Thomas and I didn't. But there's something comforting in knowing you could survive even a worst-case scenario, that you're stronger than you think. The baby shower is next week, and I've been helping Emma's mother plan it. We've become friends through this process, bonded by our shared love for our children and our desire to support them through this transition into parenthood. She's been married to Emma's father for 35 years, and their marriage seems solid and happy. Sometimes I feel a twinge of envy watching them together, seeing what a successful long-term marriage looks like. But mostly I'm just happy that Emma has that example in her life, that model of commitment and partnership that works. I bought Sophie a rocking chair for the nursery, a beautiful wooden piece that I had custom-made by a local craftsman. I've been imagining rocking my granddaughter in that chair, singing her lullabies, telling her stories, watching her grow. This baby represents hope and new beginnings, a fresh chapter for our family that isn't defined by Thomas's betrayal but by love and possibility and the future stretching out before us. Sometimes I think about what advice I'd give to my younger self, that 24-year-old woman who was so in love with Thomas and so certain they'd be together forever. I think I'd tell her to maintain her own identity throughout the marriage, to never lose sight of who she is independent of being someone's wife. I'd tell her to pay attention when she starts feeling disconnected from her partner, to insist on addressing problems rather than letting them fester. I'd tell her that love isn't enough if it's not accompanied by communication and effort and mutual respect. But I'd also tell her that even if things don't work out the way she expects, even if she gets her heart broken in the worst possible way, she'll survive it. She'll discover strength she doesn't know she has. She'll build a life she couldn't have imagined, full of richness and possibility. She'll be okay, better than okay, actually. She'll be herself in ways she never was during her marriage, and that will be a gift even though it comes wrapped in pain. If my story has touched you, please subscribe to this channel. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps create a space where people can share their experiences and find community. Click that subscribe button and join us on this journey. The neighborhood book club I belong to is reading a novel about divorce this month, and the discussions have been fascinating. Several of the women are in long-term marriages and have admitted they sometimes feel disconnected from their partners, but don't know how to address it. They've been asking me questions about how I missed the signs of Thomas's affair, what I wish I'd done differently, how I'd recommend handling marital problems before they escalate to betrayal. I've tried to be honest without being preachy. I tell them that every marriage is different, that what worked or didn't work for Thomas and me might not apply to their situations. But I do emphasize the importance of honest communication, of not sweeping problems under the rug, of making your partnership a priority even when life gets busy with work and kids and everything else. I tell them that complacency is the enemy of marriage, that you have to keep choosing each other and putting in effort even after the honeymoon phase ends. Some of the women have taken my advice to heart and reported back that they've had difficult but important conversations with their husbands, addressing issues they'd been avoiding. A few have started marriage counseling. One couple went on their first date night in 3 years. I'm glad if my experience can help others avoid the same fate, if sharing my pain can prevent even one marriage from imploding the way mine did. I've also been honest about the fact that sometimes marriages end even when you do everything right, that betrayal isn't always preventable, that sometimes your partner makes choices that have nothing to do with anything you did or didn't do. That's a hard truth to accept, that you can't control other people's behavior no matter how much you love them or how hard you work on the relationship. But it's an important truth, one that has helped me let go of the guilt and self-blame I carried for so long after Thomas left. The support group is planning a retreat next month, a weekend getaway where we can all decompress and connect more deeply. We're going to the Oregon coast, renting a big beach house where we can walk on the sand, sit around the fire, share our stories and our healing strategies. I'm looking forward to it, to that concentrated time with women who truly understand what I've been through, who don't need explanations or context because they've lived their own versions of this experience. Dr. Chun and I are also nearing the end of our formal therapy relationship. She thinks I've processed the trauma sufficiently that I don't need weekly sessions anymore, though she's encouraged me to check in periodically or come back if I hit rough patches. It's bittersweet, ending therapy, because she's been such an important part of my healing journey. But it's also a sign of progress, evidence that I've moved forward enough to navigate life without that weekly support. I ran into Vanessa a few weeks ago at a coffee shop downtown. She was alone, looking stressed and tired, scrolling through her phone with a frown. Part of me wanted to just leave without saying anything, but another part was curious. I walked over and said hello, and she looked up with an expression that mixed surprise and something that might have been guilt. We talked for a few minutes, awkward small talk about nothing important. But I noticed she wasn't wearing an engagement ring, even though I'd heard through mutual friends that Thomas had proposed to her months ago. When I casually mentioned marriage, she got a strange look on her face and said they'd decided to take things slowly, that there was no rush. I recognized that tone, the way she was trying to convince herself everything was fine, even as doubt crept in around the edges. I almost felt sorry for her in that moment. She'd won the prize, gotten the man who'd blown up his family for her, and now she was discovering that maybe he wasn't such a great prize after all. I wondered if Thomas was already showing her the same neglect and emotional distance that had characterized the end of our marriage. I wondered if she was starting to realize that the problem wasn't me, it was him, and that pattern would repeat itself with her too. But I didn't say any of that. I just wished her well and left, and as I walked away I felt a surprising absence of bitterness. Her relationship with Thomas was her business, her lesson to learn. I'd moved past caring about either of them enough to feel vindictive pleasure in their struggles. That indifference felt like freedom. Daniel has been spending more time with Thomas recently, slowly rebuilding their relationship. He says Thomas seems different, more introspective, attending therapy, and apparently working on himself. I'm glad for Daniel's sake if that's true, though I remain skeptical that people change fundamentally. But it's not my concern anymore. Thomas's personal growth or lack thereof doesn't affect me. My only interest is in supporting Daniel as he navigates his relationship with his father, whatever that ends up looking like. Subscribe to the channel if you're finding value in this story. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every subscription helps build this community of shared experiences and mutual support. Your participation really matters. Sophie was born on a rainy April morning, 6 pounds 3 ounces of perfect tiny human. I was there in the delivery room with Daniel and Emma's mother, watching my granddaughter enter the world, and it was the most beautiful, transcendent experience. All the pain of the past 3 years faded into insignificance in the face of this new life, this fresh beginning, this tangible symbol of hope and continuity. Holding Sophie for the first time, looking into her scrunched-up little face, I felt a profound sense of peace. This is what matters, I thought. Not the marriage that ended, or the betrayal that shattered me, or the revenge I never pursued. What matters is this love, this family we're building together, this tiny person who represents the future and all its possibilities. Thomas isn't part of this immediate circle, at least not yet, and that's okay. Sophie has plenty of people who love her, who will nurture her, who will give her the secure, happy childhood she deserves. I've been helping out several days a week, giving Emma breaks so she can nap or shower or just have some time to herself. Being a new mother is exhausting, and I remember those early weeks with Daniel, how overwhelming it all felt. But it's also magical, this time of firsts and discoveries, watching Sophie learn to focus her eyes and track movement and eventually smile. Daniel is a wonderful father, attentive and involved and completely besotted with his daughter. Watching him with Sophie makes me so proud of the man he's become. Robert has been incredibly understanding about how much time I'm spending with the baby. He's met Sophie and held her and marveled at how tiny she is, but he's also given me space to be fully present with my family during this special time. That consideration, that lack of jealousy or resentment about sharing my attention, shows me yet again what a good man he is, how different from Thomas in all the ways that matter. My business continues to grow, and I've started turning down clients because I simply don't have enough hours in the day to take on more projects. It's a good problem to have, a sign that I've built something sustainable and successful. I'm considering bringing on a third assistant and maybe eventually a junior designer who could take on some of the smaller projects while I focus on the high-end clients. The business has become not just a source of income, but a source of pride and identity, proof that I'm capable of building something significant on my own. The online publication that's been publishing my essays asked if I'd be interested in writing a regular column about life after divorce, rebuilding identity, finding strength through adversity. I said yes immediately, excited by the opportunity to reach more people with my story and to formalize my writing practice. The column launched last month, and the response has been overwhelming, with hundreds of women commenting on each piece, sharing their own experiences, thanking me for giving voice to their struggles. This unexpected writing career has become one of the most fulfilling aspects of my new life. I never considered myself a writer before, never imagined I had anything important to say that others would want to read. But pain and healing have given me a voice, and vulnerability has given me an audience. I'm helping people by sharing my story, and that feels meaningful in ways my old life never quite did. I recently attended a wedding, the daughter of a friend from the book club. I'd been nervous about going, worried it would bring back painful memories of Daniel and Emma's wedding and everything that happened there. But it was actually fine, even enjoyable. I watched the young couple exchange vows and felt happy for them, hopeful that they'd have the lasting love that Thomas and I didn't. The wedding didn't trigger me the way I'd feared. It was just a wedding, a celebration, a beginning for two people I cared about. That realization, that I could attend a wedding without falling apart, felt like another marker of healing. The events of 3 years ago no longer have the power to ruin present moments for me. I've integrated that experience into my history without letting it define my future. It's part of my story, but it's not the whole story, and it's not the ending. My support group friends throw me a surprise party for my 55th birthday, which fell last month. They decorated one woman's house with balloons and streamers, made a cake, gave me thoughtful gifts. We spent the evening laughing and telling stories and celebrating not just my birthday, but all of our collective resilience and growth. 3 years ago, I couldn't have imagined feeling this happy, this content, this surrounded by love and friendship. But here I was, genuinely joyful, living a life I'd built from scratch after everything fell apart. Sophie is 6 months old now, sitting up on her own, grabbing everything in reach, babbling constantly in her baby language. She lights up when she sees me, reaching out her chubby little arms to be held, and my heart melts every single time. Being her grandmother is one of the greatest joys of my life, right up there with being Daniel's mother. This love, this family bond that transcends the dissolution of my marriage, this is what endures. Daniel told me recently that Thomas wants to meet Sophie, that he's been asking repeatedly to be introduced to his granddaughter. Daniel has been resistant, still working through his feelings about his father, still protecting Emma from more potential drama. But he's considering it, thinking maybe it's time to let Thomas start being part of Sophie's life, even if their relationship remains strained. I told Daniel I'd support whatever decision he makes, that this is entirely his call to make. For my part, I have no interest in being present when Thomas meets Sophie. That's their family business, not mine. I've successfully created a life that doesn't intersect with Thomas's except when absolutely necessary, and I intend to keep it that way. He's Sophie's grandfather, and if he can be a positive presence in her life, that's good for her. But I don't need to be part of that equation. I've moved on completely, and I want to protect the peace I've worked so hard to build. Please take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already. We're building a community here, and your subscription helps us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers while creating space for more people to share and heal together. Robert and I took a trip to San Francisco last month, our first real vacation together. We walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, explored the waterfront, ate amazing food, stayed in a charming hotel in North Beach. It was wonderful, romantic and fun, and easy in ways I'd forgotten relationships could be. Robert is attentive without being smothering, interesting without being self-absorbed, affectionate without being demanding. He's taught me that partnership doesn't have to be complicated or painful, that two people can simply enjoy each other's company without drama or betrayal. I found myself thinking during that trip that I could be happy with Robert long-term, that maybe eventually I would be ready to consider marriage again, or at least a deeper commitment. But there's no rush, no pressure. We're both enjoying what we have now, letting it evolve naturally, not trying to force it into any particular shape or timeline. After spending so many years in a marriage that ultimately meant nothing, I'm in no hurry to make another lifetime commitment. But I'm also not closed to the possibility, if it feels right someday. The house feels like truly mine now, not the house I shared with Thomas, but my house, filled with my choices and my aesthetic and my energy. I've repainted almost every room, replaced furniture, hung new artwork, created spaces that reflect who I am now rather than who I was during my marriage. The master bedroom, in particular, has been completely transformed, now decorated in soothing blues and greens with new bedding and curtains and a reading nook by the window where I spend peaceful mornings with coffee and a book. I've made peace with most of what happened, accepted that Thomas's betrayal was about his own brokenness rather than my inadequacy, forgiven myself for not seeing the signs earlier, released the anger that once consumed me. I wouldn't say I've completely forgiven Thomas for the cruelty of how he handled things, but I no longer spend emotional energy thinking about it. He's just someone I used to know, someone who hurt me but no longer has the power to affect my well-being. The most unexpected gift of this whole terrible experience has been discovering who I really am beneath all the roles I played for so long. I'm not just someone's wife or mother or daughter. I'm Margaret, a woman with talents and interests and opinions and dreams of her own. I'm a successful businesswoman, a writer, a friend, a grandmother, a partner to Robert, a member of a community. I'm complex and capable and worthy of love and respect, and I don't need anyone else to validate that truth. Looking back at that woman who sat at the wedding dinner 3 years ago, I want to reach through time and tell her it's going to be okay, better than okay, actually. I want to tell her that the pain she's about to experience will be intense but temporary, that she'll survive it and emerge stronger. I want to tell her that losing Thomas will turn out to be a liberation rather than a tragedy, that the life she'll build on her own will be richer and more authentic than anything she's experienced so far. But that woman couldn't have heard that message then. She needed to walk through the fire herself, to experience the full weight of the betrayal and the despair and the slow, difficult process of rebuilding. She needed to discover her own strength through being forced to use it. That's how transformation works. Not through avoiding pain, but through moving through it with courage and support and determination. I'm grateful now for many things about this experience, even though I would never have chosen it. I'm grateful for the relationships that deepened, like those with Daniel and Mom and Rachel. I'm grateful for the new friendships with the women in my support group, for the community we've created together. I'm grateful for discovering my passion for writing and my talent for interior design. I'm grateful for meeting Robert and experiencing what a healthy partnership feels like. I'm grateful for Sophie and the pure, uncomplicated joy she brings to my life. I'm even grateful, in a strange way, for Thomas's betrayal because it forced me to become the person I was always meant to be. I don't thank him for it, and I don't excuse what he did, but I can acknowledge that the pain catalyzed a transformation that might never have happened otherwise. Sometimes we need to be broken open before we can fully bloom, need to lose what we thought we couldn't live without before we discover what we're truly capable of. If you've been following my story and finding connection in it, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. We're almost at our goal of 1,000 subscribers, and your participation helps build this community where we can all support each other through life's difficult transitions. Click that subscribe button and join us. The other day, I was playing with Sophie in my living room, watching her discover her toes and giggle with delight, and I felt a wave of contentment wash over me. This moment, right here, with my granddaughter's laughter filling my home, with sunlight streaming through windows and a house that's truly mine, with a life I've built entirely on my own terms, this is happiness. It's not the happiness I planned for, not the life I expected to be living at 55, but it's real and earned and deeply satisfying. I've learned that life doesn't follow our scripts, that the future we imagine rarely matches the future we actually experience. Plans fall apart. People disappoint us. Events we never could have predicted change everything in an instant. But none of that means we're powerless or doomed to misery. We adapt. We rebuild. We discover resources within ourselves we didn't know existed. We create new dreams to replace the ones that died. We find meaning and joy in unexpected places. My story isn't unique. Millions of women go through divorces, betrayals, public humiliations, the destruction of lives they thought were secure. What makes any story worth sharing isn't its uniqueness, but its universality, the ways it resonates with others going through similar experiences. If you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own nightmare, whether it's a betrayal or a divorce or some other life-shattering event, I want you to know that you will survive it. You will get to the other side. You will rebuild. You will discover your own strength. The path through isn't easy or quick. There are no shortcuts through grief and pain. You have to feel it, process it, work through it step by step. Some days you'll feel like you're making progress. Other days you'll feel like you're right back at the beginning. That's normal. That's how healing works. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your own process. Reach out for support when you need it. Allow yourself to lean on others. You Dawn.